are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dursey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of APA and Chair of the New Urbanism Division, and I am your webcast moderator. Today, Friday, April 7th, we will hear the presentation, BikeShare, Beyond the Plan. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box found in the webcast toolbar, or you can call that 1-800 number shown in bold. And for your content questions related to the presentation, you can type those in the questions box, also located in your webinar toolbar, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Coming up on your screen is a list of our sponsoring chapters and divisions. Thanks to all of those participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free to their members. If you're looking at the screen and you don't see your division or your chapter listed, we ask that you reach out to them and suggest that they become a member of our consortium. Today's webcast is sponsored by the Transportation Planning Division, and you can learn about them by visiting planning.org/divisions/transportation. And to log your, on your screen is coming up is a list of the upcoming sessions that we have. And I'll tell you that we have several more that are pending right now, so we're going to be adding them shortly. So keep an eye out on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, and also on our Facebook page as we get those squared away and ready for you to register. And to log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, just head over to planning.org and log into your MyAPA account. And then you can search for CM activities, either by today's title or by the event number, both of which can be found on our webcast webpage. And this webcast has been approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing only. We do have some recorded webcasts that are available for distance education credit, and you can check out the availability of those by visiting our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And like I mentioned, like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, and you'll receive up-to-date information on our sessions. We are recording today's webcast. It will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube. And we'll have a PDF available for you to download at the conclusion of the presentation on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. Now, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today and then get us started. Lindsay West, CEO of Bantam Strategy Group, founded and operated the first electric pedal assist bike sharing system in the Western Hemisphere and 5th in the world. Zyp BikeShare in Birmingham, Alabama. West has more than 12 years of operations experience in public transportation and healthcare. She was instrumental in transportation and air quality programs while serving as Deputy Director of Operations at the Regional Planning Commission of Greater Birmingham for 6 years prior to BikeShare. West launched Bantam, a DBE company, as the premier BikeShare consulting, management, and operations company for small, medium-sized cities. Bantam is headquartered in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and collaborates with multiple entities to make the BikeShare vision a reality. West also represents the BikeShare industry on various national platforms, promoting vibrant and cycle-friendly communities. Scott Tillman is the Director of Planning and Operations for the Regional Planning Commission of Greater Birmingham. He is responsible for oversight of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is composed of elected officials. The MPO is responsible for maintaining the programs necessary to receive Federal Highway Administration funds. Scott has been the planning director for the last 5 years and oversees a staff of 18. He also manages and provides oversight to Congestion Management, Alabama Partners for Clean Air, Commute Smart, Building Communities, and the Transportation Data Center. Raised in Birmingham, Alabama, Scott now lives in Trussville, Alabama, with his wife and 2 kids. He is a graduate of Auburn University with a degree in aviation management, and he has a master's of business administration from Oklahoma City University. Scott served 6 years in the active duty U.S. Air Force and continues to serve in the U.S. Air Force Reserves, where he holds a rank of Lieutenant Colonel. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay West.
Perfect. I hope that you can all see my screen and that you enjoy our BikeShare presentation today. This presentation came about with several conversations that I have been having over the years, and with my local government background, coming from the public sector and moving into the private sector, felt like this presentation was appropriate, and also wanted to bring Scott Tillman in to the presentation and the conversation, because he was instrumental and in the trenches with me as we were launching and started to operate the BikeShare system in Birmingham, which now has turned into my passion and what I do every day, which is eat, live, sleep, breathe, BikeShare. And we wanted to talk about our process, but we wanted to talk about it in terms of beyond the plan as well, because we all know that people can that a lot of momentum can come from a plan, particularly a BikeShare feasibility study, but what do you do with that plan once it's finished so it doesn't collect dust on the shelf or become irrelevant for your city? So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on what is BikeShare. I'm sure that you've seen it or experienced it, whether it's in your community or another community, and or researched it, but it's just self-automated bike sharing system meant for short one-way trips, membership-based typically, and it's a dense network of stations and docks conveniently located, yet that's changing, and I'll be talking to you about some of the changes coming in the bike share industry. And it's typically an annual membership-based, $75 to $100, and a day pass for anywhere from $6 to $10, that kind of range, where the first 30 or 45 minutes is included in that membership cost, and that your time starts over every time you undock the bike, and then user fees apply to anyone that keeps the bike longer than a 30 or 45 minute period. That exists typically so people don't carry the bike into their loft or office or hotel and keep the bike all day, and then it doesn't become bike share. So that is just a quick rundown of what bike share is. I didn't want to spend a ton of time on that, because if you're joining us for this, you will likely already know all of those facts. What you would get from a typical bike share plan is they would cover the economic competitiveness of bike share and talk to you about how 54% of millennials surveyed say they'd consider moving to another city if they had better transportation options. Likely they would talk about how millennials and baby boomers align on active outdoor living. So bike share really checks the box for a wide variety of demographics of residents that you're surveying. They would talk about how it can help large employers for the recruitment and retention, but also small mom and pop retails and restaurants with estimated extra money spent by cyclists. The study would likely cover transportation options and connectivity and first and last mile solutions, and pull out stats of how people are using the system or would use this system. And they would also talk about the health and wellness aspects of bike share, how we can reduce chronic illnesses, and how a large amount of our country continues to become obese and continues to live unhealthy lifestyles, and how bike share systems track your checkouts and your miles ridden and your calories burned and your vehicle emissions reduced so you can access certain federal funds. So all of those things would be covered in a feasibility study or an implementation plan, and those are all wonderful and valid things, and I've seen it over and over and again in communities, and it's very true what the feasibility study will say. And if that's what your community needs to get started with bike share, then I recommend you do that. You'll also, from a feasibility study, most likely get a heat map and or a system phasing map, similar to what you see here, and this is for Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and talking about the 3 phases recommended for the community. You would also likely get that what bike share will do for your community is that it will connect people regardless of socioeconomic status to places and communities within your city. Of course, this is for Baton Rouge, with a high-performing, accessible, sustainable transportation alternative that promotes health and economic vitality. Sounds like a large order, a tall order, but I've seen this accomplished in multiple communities across the country. So the feasibility study gives you a level of political support, community support, and private sector support needed. Also in that study, you would likely visit various vendors that are available to you, whether it's the docking system that you see right there, docking-based bike share system. But they're going to talk to you about the quality of vendors and working with vendors with track records. And I would encourage you to do that as well. Bantam, my bike share consulting and operations company, is not vendor exclusive, but there are a few capital vendors that I absolutely will not work with based on the quality of their product. I'm obviously not showing you any of those vendors today. But this is a dock-based system, probably the most traditional bike share system and not what people are used to seeing. You have B-Cycle, very well known company owned by Trek. Their bike share system's owned by Trek, and they've had various versions of their bike share system, and this is their new bike B-Cycle Dash that will be released later this year. And it's a smart bike system with a turn-by-turn navigation built in. And this is kind of the next wave of what you're seeing coming. This is the BWegan system. It's an electric pedal assist system. This is what we launched in Birmingham. This is the Zyp BikeShare system. And BWegan Technologies is the company. They only offer an electric pedal. They offer an electric pedal assist bike that can be retrofitted as well. To not be, but it's the same body style. And it is a dock-based system, but with the technology living on the bike, so it's kind of a hybrid system. And we're going to talk about the electric pedal assist bike a little bit more in a bit. And then you have social bicycles. They're basically the pioneer of the smart bike in the U.S. and all the technology lives on the bike, and the docks are just kind of irrelevant. They're not really required, but typically they're implemented for user reliability and keeping the city uniformed and predictable. It basically is their parking spot, our parking space. So we'll talk about the smart bike and the equipment a little bit more in a touch. But this was the Birmingham process. So we started with the bike share task force in the summer of 2013, which that task force stayed in place and was instrumental moving forward. And once we launched, it kind of morphed into a board of directors and a technical advisory committee into our corporate sponsors. And we began with a feasibility study and implementation plan. Tool Design Group did this plan for us. It was a very well done, well designed, well thought out plan. And we needed that feasibility study to build at that time the political support and community kind of will for this project. So having a feasibility study for us was a great thing. But we got done with the study and the implementation plan with Tool Design Group, and then the Regional Planning Commission, who I was with at the time, and with Scott Tillman, you know, we kind of looked at each other and said, well, we're a planning agency. This is not something that we should be implementing. But with permission, received the green light to move forward with implementation as long as I found a new partnering home for it, where I reached out to a local nonprofit and linked up with them and began the process to secure the vendor equipment with the Regional Planning Commission, being that it's a government entity and we were using federal dollars for that. As a partner, the Planning Commission has stayed on and has continued on with the Technical Advisory Committee and moved forward with fundraising through this nonprofit. And the fundraising was done after the capital equipment was purchased with federal dollars, was done through the private sector. So we raised all of the funds required, and we unveiled in May of 2015, unveiled the bike and our sponsors. Our right-of-way agreement was unanimously finalized by City Council, and we finalized our site locations, and I'll be talking about each one of these components in more detail. We hired our local staff. Our website went live in August. We started selling pre-memberships or founding memberships, and we launched our system in October 2015 on the 14th. So from the summer of 2013 to the fall of 2015 is the path. This is the path that we took. This is one of the reasons that I started my company, because of this process. I think I'm one of the few in the country, I'm not the only, but one of the few in the country that have actually been through the bike share process from the very beginning, from A, on the government local level, to Z, which is operating the system, because I did leave the Planning Commission and continue on with BikeShare, and how to get from A to Z, and it actually not being this long of a process, even though you all will know with transportation projects, this timeline is pretty rapid. But too many cities are figuring this process out the hard way. We certainly have some lessons learned and best practices from walking through, and have had some missteps ourselves, or other communities are going through this. They're having missteps on best practices for just bike share in general. They're going through these lengthy timelines that just aren't necessary, and at the end it's costing them more money going through this process and trying to figure out each step. And also the manpower that it takes to launch a system is typically underestimated. I know it was in Birmingham at first, and so I created Bantam to serve the small to medium-sized city, particularly because that, I believe, is the next wave of bike share systems coming in the U.S., and that's where I was raised and born and worked in local government. And so I really feel like I get the small to medium-sized city, and particularly in the lens of bike share. So Bantam becomes that manpower. We build those local relationships, and we become the most knowledgeable to operate the system. And we're able to leverage economies of scale between multiple cities under one Bantam umbrella. And whether the cities are side by side or states apart, we can leverage those economies of scale. But at the same time, we've set up a system where we're still accountable to each of those municipalities or local governments and local stakeholders. And I think that's really important, particularly with the small to medium-sized city and moving forward with launching a transportation system, which is really what a community is doing when they launch bike share. So one of the things that I've been talking about is manpower, and it really does take a village to launch a bike share system. It certainly requires the local government to be involved, a dedicated person, which I was that in Birmingham, I'm that in Baton Rouge currently, and a dedicated person that can kind of rally the troops and bring all the various parties together. There's certainly a large public and private coordination effort that has to happen in order to implement and operate a bike share system. And typically the public sector does not raise the kind of funds needed that bike share does for operations, and obviously a private sector entity cannot access the right of way, the city ordinance, and all the permitting and all of that required. So this is truly a public-private partnership that has to take place. So one person coordinating that is going to expedite the process. This task force that I mentioned that we formed was made up of public and private entities mostly. It was potential funders. Most of them did come to the table funding, and or where we went into private property, they provided us an easement to do that. And then obviously the public sector was at the table, from the mayor's office to city council to the planning department to the permitting and engineering department. The lawyers, the list goes on of the individuals that were involved, and obviously the Planning Commission and the MPO also were very instrumental in this, and from the beginning, and still is. And then I just left this on here because I think it's important to say. We did have a seat at the table for an advocate. Usually bike share systems are not advocate driven. I would actually recommend they are not. But we do reserve a seat at the table for our advocate to be present, whether it's picking vendors for the feasibility study or for the equipment, and just having some say in the process and what we're doing, and being that bicycling voice that the community respects and knows, and can be part of that process. It goes a long way. And so I want to note before I leave this screen, this picture you're seeing is actually a group of people from Baton Rouge in Birmingham looking at the Zyp BikeShare system and visiting us to see what we did and hear our best practices and lessons learned. But this this solar canopy, I will reference later. So when I reference it, I wanted you to know what it was. But that's what powers the electric pedal assist bikes at 5 of the 40 stations in Birmingham. So I will reference the solar canopy later, and so I just wanted to point it out. But proper funding for bike share is important, even though this is shifting a bit, excuse me, shifting a bit. Proper funding, we secured the federal dollars with Scott Tillman. And Scott, if you want to jump in on this slide or the next one at any time, you're more than welcome to do that, because you certainly work these federal funding sources. But timing is the most important when you're working with stakeholders that don't understand the MPO or how federal dollars flow into the community. A lot of times explaining to them the timing of these funds up front is very important. And obviously the local match required, making sure that the city, the planning commission, or whoever, the county, whoever's providing that local match is on board and sponsoring that actual application for those federal funds. And this is where that public-private coordination comes in, but we raised 5 years of sponsorship dollars. I like the 5-year model. I know individuals is the best practice. Some cities have done less than 5 years, and I think we've all kind of, as the bike share industry has progressed, we've all realized that about 5 years worth of funding is actually much better for all of us, and to really grab our footing and to excel a successful bike share system. Also, I mentioned local accountability. I typically do this under a 501c3 if needed. It is not required in some cases, in a lot of cases, but if you have a regional system, I would recommend a 501c3, or if you are not comfortable with the public-private partnership specifically, and you want there to be an additional local dedicated board to keep that accountability between your operator and vendor and the city and or other stakeholders, I would recommend a 501c3. I would recommend that it is specific to bike share. This is a lesson learned out of Birmingham. We partnered with an organization, it's a great organization called Rev Birmingham, but it's got its hands in a lot of different things, economic development projects, community development projects that are solely focused on the downtown area and 5 districts of the city of Birmingham. As other cities in the region are interested in this, it's becoming a barrier because that's against their mission to go outside of the downtown core, and it's becoming a barrier to launching more of a regional system with these other cities at the table. So I would recommend just go ahead and start with a new 501c3 with a dedicated board specifically devoted to bike share. It is a transportation system after all, so let's treat it as such. But that's where your local accountability can really live, between your private operator and vendor and the city and other local stakeholders if necessary.
And I'll jump in right here just to talk about the federal funds. That also, you want to keep your MPO apprised of what's happening with the bike share plan, because you know eventually you'll go back and ask for those either SCP funds, CMAQ funds, something of that sort. So you want to make sure that you're keeping them aware of what's going on and also get their input as you go along, because they are a funding partner, even though they are doing federal money, and it may be people that are outside the area of where bike share is going to be impacted. And also, I want to also bring out the 501c3, that one of the reasons we went with someone local that had one is because of time. So if this is the model you want to do, I would encourage people to start it early, because there is a, as you look at the timeline which we took, we shortened it a little bit. At least we tried to do it faster by avoiding the 501c3. So that's another option there. So
yeah, absolutely. And I, obviously being an operator, knowledge and expertise of people that know how to launch and run bike share systems is something obviously that I encourage. You will be either paying now or paying later if you try to run it all locally. And so that's just something to consider. So next slide. There, system funding. I just want to touch on this. This is just an example. This is actually for Baton Rouge. The numbers may vary depending on the size of the system you're looking at and the equipment that you use, but this was created by Tool Design Group for Baton Rouge. And it's a great starting point for us in securing federal dollars and the corporate funding that we need, and it's a good model for you to follow. But I will say that the shift is coming in the industry where you may see less government funding for bike share, or it will be repurposed for more bike infrastructure, and the privatization of these systems is becoming more prevalent. I won't say it's always the best fit or the right fit, but there are some pros and cons to that. And We are certainly looking at that as an industry right now very rapidly and dedicating a lot of time to it. But it could expedite the process of launching. It could cost the city less money, if any money, actually. More vendors will shift to this, so the quality of products under this model will improve. I will say right now I'm not thrilled with the quality of products necessarily that are coming into the U.S. that are being offered right now under this model. So I'm looking forward to seeing that shift for the more quality products like I was showing you earlier. And then, so you don't have to go with the cheapest. And then cities just need to be aware that you're giving up what you're giving up for not putting in any money, obviously. Less control, less oversight. The vendor could pull out of the market if it wasn't lucrative for them. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, and there's clauses and certain things that can be put in place, obviously, to protect the community, which as a neutral party I would recommend and work through with you. But you know, this is not a bad shift. I'm excited to see where this goes and to be able to kind of ebb and flow with market. But I just wanted communities to consider both sides of the coin and be aware of what's coming down the pipeline. And but this is the typical funding that we've seen, where the capital is provided and installations provided by federal funding sources, as you see up top, and local dollars to the match. And then the operations, which is below the line, is covered by corporate sponsorships, the user revenues, and the ad panels. So all the money from the system goes back into running the BikeShare system. And that is so imperative for the BikeShare system to be sustainable long-term. So I would encourage communities to not be greedy with the revenues of the system. And again, there's that local accountability through the 501c3, so you can see what it is and what's coming. And you'll find vendors like myself who are willing to work with you guys on some things. But just know that the user revenues, in particular, the fare box recovery, is not 100% for BikeShare typically. So those corporate sponsors and ad panels are imperative, which kind of leads us into a great discussion about ordinances. And looking, this should be one of the first things that, as a city employee, that I would recommend you do, is looking at the bicycle laws. Most of the time they're outdated, have not been looked at since the 70s. And so looking at your bike laws to make sure there's just nothing in there that's unnecessary to launching a BikeShare system. And if there is, prior to the BikeShare buzz even starting, to just go ahead and shift those bicycle laws, whether it's requiring a license plate or something just kind of ridiculous on there, which is what we found. I've found in almost every community there's something silly that needs to be removed. Also looking at if you have a helmet law or what that helmet law is. Most cities do defer to the state law. Typically state laws are anywhere from 16 and older. You're not required to wear a helmet, which is what we BikeShare like to also refer to. It's the state law. We actually, I would not recommend a mandatory helmet law. It is a barrier to access, not just for the general user, but also for low-income users. You're actually adding an additional cost for them to use the public transportation system. And there are studies that have been shown that low-income individuals are typically targeted for ticketing more on BikeShare, etc. So to not go too far into that rabbit hole, I just would recommend a non-mandatory helmet law and to point to whatever your state law is, presuming your state law is at least covering children still wearing helmets, etc. But looking at your helmet law is very important. But I would say one of the more important ones is signage. And making sure that ad panels, which you can see here on the right side of the screen, just half of an ad panel, and that the branding on the kiosk is allowed. You can also see a little logo right here on one of the docking stations, and allowing for those. A lot of times, in Birmingham in particular, we got lucky because there was a city council individual also looking at the bus shelter signage at the time and wanting to revise that. And so we were able to slip BikeShare into that as well and get it covered to where we were able to properly in the right-of-way have ad panels and kiosk branding. The bike is less of an issue because even though it is stationary in the right-of-way, it does move. So that tends to be less of an issue, but I would certainly look at your local signage ordinances to really see and begin making those shifts and changes to allow for bike share if your city is looking to launch a system. Site planning as well is really important. One of the, I would say, best practices that we did in Birmingham was we had a franchise right-of-way agreement with the city. So the city council, after much review from the legal department, the city council unanimously approved a franchise right-of-way agreement. What that did was allow us to put bike share anywhere in the right-of-way in the footprint of the map that we provided them. And that map did come from the feasibility study. And we did have to get a sign-off from planning and engineering to get, obviously, for each individual site. So there was some steps with permitting and with approval, the sign-off from the engineer that we did need. So it was a great process, though, because now we do not have to go back to the city council every time we need to shift a bike share station, or you know, if there was a change in that map for any reason, we could work on, or that individual site, we could work on that at an individual level with the engineer drawings, with permitting and engineering, and get it squared away with the city staff instead of having to go back to city council. So I would recommend a franchise right-of-way agreement, or in Louisiana, depending on your state laws, a cooperative endeavorment agreement, a CEA, which is basically doing the same thing. It's also just covering a lot more. With the CEA, sometimes there are provisions that it has to be a public service, which obviously bike share is, or it has to be under the pretenses of economic development, which I think there's definitely a case to be made for bike share being an economic development tool. So there could be the CEA as well. So either one of those, I thought that was definitely the franchise right-of-way agreement for us in Birmingham. We've given that best practice to other communities that were working through this process and how they should approach this with their city, and it seems to work very well. I'll also say another best practice was we did not release the map. As soon as we had the station sited and they were signed off by planning and engineering from the city of Birmingham, we did not release that map prior to launch. Well, we did, but it was right before we launched the system. And Chattanooga, Tennessee actually shared this best practice with us. But everyone all of a sudden becomes a bike share expert and a bike share planner when you release the stations locations to them. So doing that close to your launch time is probably better. Obviously, you've gone through the approvals with the city. You can make sure your internal stakeholders know about where the stations are going to make sure that everyone's comfortable and happy with it. But beyond releasing it to the public, I would say do that closer to launch. You are opening yourself up for probably more criticism than is necessary by launching it too soon. The map that you saw earlier of Baton Rouge from the study, that's showing phasing. And those black dots were just indications of density and not the exact corner or locations of where the stations should be. So it's another great alternative. So people do kind of get the idea of where there will be bike stations available. And then the permitting / approval process, I'll just say from this standpoint, there's likely not an existing bike share permit. The process is a little bit different, so outlining as much as you can in the franchise right-of-way agreement, and then just sitting down with the permitting department heads and anyone that's going to be signing off and getting a process in place prior to launching the system or prior to getting too far past the site planning, I would say you need to do. A lot of times you can get the permitting waived as well. Cities, typically, that's where they can really work with you. But working out that approval process and streamlining it for each site that's planned, and what does the city want to see from us, and you all are in positions to help determine that, but and to not make it too daunting, but really setting a process that can be duplicated as expansion happens and or system stations are mobile and change. I'm going to revisit the equipment a little bit more because I really want to focus on the quality of the bike product. We're seeing, particularly for the small to medium-sized city, because that's what's really coming up next. But there are several companies that offer leasing options, and they work with the bike shops instead of doing their own bike maintenance. And I really feel like cities at the end, you are going to pay for more than if you kind of follow this traditional model or the new model coming out. So again, you either pay now or you pay later. So I really encourage you to look at the quality of the product, the bike share vendors, and don't just settle for the cheapest. You again are launching a transportation system that your citizens are riding on in your streets. And so quality really does matter. It's also not just bikes that you're purchasing, it's the technology that makes the system work that is very, very important. And then the operations of the system, not just the product, but not just halfway doing it, but having dedicated customer service, dedicated mechanic and maintenance staff, where you know you're putting a quality product out there that's been serviced, that's paid attention to. When you call the customer service line, they can respond, fairly quickly and answer the phone immediately, but respond pretty quickly. That's really the model you want. I like to focus on local operations, hiring local staff, and to really focus on this system. And it is attainable for the small to medium-sized community. And so I would encourage you to look at all equipment vendors. And again, I'm not an exclusive vendor. I don't have an exclusive vendor. And so I can provide you and point you in directions if you would like input on features and quality and such. The electric pedal assist bike is what we launched in Birmingham. There are definitely operational challenges that go along with launching electric pedal assist bike share system. I don't recommend it for every community. I don't think if you don't need it, if topography is not an issue for you, even though it does reduce other barriers to entry, I would say topography is the #1 issue. If you don't need it, then I would say don't spend money on it. It can be a little costly. One of the lessons learned as well is we did do solar for our system, which those solar canopies I showed you earlier, they absolutely work. They work very well, the canopies do, but I would recommend any station that doesn't have the canopy that it is plugged into the grid system and that it is electric, because there are operational burdens and it becomes very costly to switch out the batteries. So I would not recommend that as a best practice. This was a lesson learned for us. But at the same time, solar canopies, they work, but they're expensive and they're not mobile. Being as it is a canopy, there are footers, or it has to go into the ground, into your infrastructure. And so, just think about all those considerations before launching electric pedal assist bike share. I'm the first and one of the only electric pedal assist bike share operators in North and South America, so I do know what I'm talking about when it comes to that. I like electric pedal assist bikes. We certainly have had more usage. 44%, those bikes are used more than any other bike in the bike share system in Birmingham, and 44% of users said they would use bike share more if there were more electric pedal assist bikes, because we did not have 100% of our fleet electric pedal assist. We only had a portion. But I would just say from the city perspective, if you don't need it, then I would not force it. But if you have topography issues, this is absolutely a great option for you. But I would recommend that it's plugged into the grid. It's easily attainable. Live GPS on the bikes are a great feature. It's not only for security, but from a planning perspective, that data can be shared with the planning departments, the city, the county, the planning commissions, and be used and implemented in your bike plans and your community planning and your transit routes even. And this is data that likely you are not getting or collecting on this level yet for cycling. Some communities may be, but most smaller, medium-sized cities are not. And so this is a wealth of data and knowledge now that is at your fingertips when you launch a bike share system. And most systems have this available open source to you, and is something that you should partner with the bike share operator on getting. The smart bike is an option that I love, and social bicycles, which I think is who's pictured there, and B-Cycle Dash, which I showed you earlier, are both great smart bike options here in the U.S. Social Bike was certainly the pioneer of this. And they have electric pedal assist options coming out soon. Both of those vendors do. So that will help with kind of providing more options in the industry. But I love the smart bike. I like that the technology lives on the bike. You can go dockless with the system if you want to. And it just gives you a little bit more flexibility. the dockless bike is coming, which is very similar to a smart bike. In reality, it is a smart bike, but I like to call it the dockless bike because there's a wave of companies coming in where the back wheel locks, it's dockless, it's not required, but there's a wave of Chinese companies, and there's a company called Spin in California launching these in the U.S. right now. They're starting to kind of come in. One of the selling features I've heard is that it takes little to no maintenance, and they're offering ridiculously swift response times. I would caution a community on these things because I can tell you those response times that I've seen so far are absolutely impossible to meet. And selling little to no maintenance is great in theory, but I'm not sure you'd put your residents on a bus that wasn't maintained. I certainly wouldn't be putting my family on a roller coaster that wasn't maintained. So I'm not sure putting your citizens and family members on a bike that is said to have little or to no maintenance required is a good plan. So these are new. This is a kind of a new wave coming in, so I would just caution you. I'm not telling you not to look at this option, but just keep some different lenses on while you do. Because I am hesitant about these specific bikes and the model. And without regulation, it could cause some chaos, kind of the wild, wild west mentality on your sidewalks, your parks, and your urban fabric. I know China has seen this happen. I think we have more ordinances and regulations already in place as cities to not let it get to the wild, wild west. But I would encourage you to, as you're looking at your ordinances and you're looking at your right-of-way agreements and all of that, to really build these and make a decision as a community. Do you want these dockless bikes as an option or do you not? And building your ordinances to either prevent or allow for the system. It's already bringing a change in the industry for sure, and the business model offered to communities will look different, very different from what I just showed you from the funding as well. Believe me, we're proactively, rapidly working to get ahead of this from a business development and strategy standpoint. It's an exciting time to be in, but and from equipment and operations for communities, we're certainly looking at new and innovative things. I do believe there will be some positives for cities that take their time and work through these regulations and ordinances and let this dockless bike develop a little more. But lean on your neutral industry experts like Bantam, and local city ordinances and regulations are what I would consider you right now if you're looking at launching a bike share to kind of visit more immediately, and that's, I think, a significant and important piece. I would watch San Francisco and I would watch New York City right now as far as the dockless bike is concerned and these companies that are coming in. But this will quickly move to the small to medium-sized city, so it's something that we've got to think about and prepare for. And again, I'm not saying it's a negative thing, but I think there are some questions not answered yet. And then this is just a typical implementation plan. This is provided by Tool Design Group, and I just really like it. There are several points in this process where we could have halted the bike share program, particularly in Birmingham and what I'm working through right now, Baton Rouge too. Could have halted in this process, but really our champions lived at the city and with the Regional Planning Commission and our corporate funders as well, and that's what kept it going. So and having their support and momentum and them helping to spearhead and push this forward with the designated kind of person who is pushing it forward was really important. So that public-private coordination and collaboration is so important. We worked with every department at the city, from planning and engineering to permitting and engineering to planning to legal to city council to mayor's office. I'm not sure there wasn't a department that I didn't work with. Community development department, we worked with all of them, and then even the maintenance department when we were going to install the systems. So there's a lot of moving parts. Bike share can be complex to implement, but it's not impossible. And try to find those partners within the industry that can help you get there if you're having a tough time figuring it out. You certainly don't need to reinvent the wheel. No pun intended with that. We have done this now. Multiple groups across the country now have launched bike share systems, and we know the process. It's paved. That can work. And I will end with that. Thank you for your time, and our contact information is available there for me and for Scott. I know I talk most of the time, which is our plan, but Scott, do you have anything that you want to throw in there? Lessons learned, best practices, just from the eyes of the MPO. You were certainly instrumental in making this happen and pushing it forward, and so just if you have anything.
Yeah, I was going to say the biggest thing is lawyers, dealing with them and your city law department. That ended up being a huge challenge that we did not see coming forward. And so there took lots of meetings and lots of working with the mayor's office for them to help interpret between us, because we're an outside entity. And so there were some challenges there, but it's nothing you can't work through. It just really becomes getting everybody in a room, but having the lawyers there and knowing that, you know, they're going to be an integral part. And so making them a part of it and working with them and not being, you know, it's easy to get mad at them, but you want to make sure that you don't, so that you understand at the end of the day they have to sign off on it. So you really want to come from it from a, hey, what are you comfortable with? Educate me type of deal. So those were those kind of conversations that we had probably every, you know, 3 or 4 weeks. We got with them, and we had more conversations about going forward with this. But to me, that was an area that I did not expect to be as big of an issue. In fact, that from what they did or said made us kind of determine what kind of plan we had to implement it, where the regional planning commission actually ended up buying all of the equipment and leasing it to the 501c3, where originally the city was going to do it because they were paying the match. So so when that changed and we had to buy it, well, then we had to go, okay, we're going to have to buy $2.4 million worth of equipment. Yeah, we don't have that kind of money around, so we had to go get a line of credit. And now the city was writing us a check for the match. And so there were things there that were a challenge that really came from the law department, really
And
changing what our plan was.
Yeah, and the procurement department, the purchasing department.
And the procurement, right, yes.
And we followed state bid laws. We did a competitive RFP process to secure the equipment through the Planning Commission, but for some reason we were hitting a barrier with the purchasing department in the city of Birmingham. Felt uncomfortable, and so we said, okay, we'll shift it to the Planning Commission, and we certainly received from our lawyers, you know, we were doing everything properly, and there was just some hesitancy there for some reason, and I think it's a lot of it's the unknown. BikeShare is different. There is not a box already established within your city government that, you know, where you know how to purchase BikeShare technology and equipment and all the services and installations required for it. And the lawyers too looked at it and said this is a totally different ballgame than what our typical right-of-way agreements are for, which is our cable typically, or, you know, fiber, things like that. And so we just had to kind of work through that comfort level. And I will say a memo went out from the mayor's office that was extremely helpful for us to all the department heads that said, you know, get behind BikeShare, find reasons of how we can do this and how we can accomplish this, and ways to say yes and not ways to say no. And that really pushed the needle in Birmingham. In Baton Rouge, I'm having very much the opposite situation. The procurement department and the legal department are a breeze. They're wonderful to work with. They're so willing to get behind this. Granted, the mayor is also behind this as well and sent that memo out. But I am having less challenges there, and my challenges are more in the corporate sector, whereas in Birmingham, the corporate sector was a breeze. So it's just each community is a little different, and we've got to just work through what those challenges are in each one. And so, and certainly there were a lot that were within the city government in Birmingham, but no other cities have done this, larger, smaller than probably what you are if you're thinking about BikeShare. And so we worked through indemnifications and insurance, and all of this has been figured out. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. We all, you know, we know how to do this, from equipment vendors to people like me who do consulting and operations, from people like Tool Design Group and also planning who do the feasibility studies. And so we're there as resources as well.
And I would wrap up with one thing: the importance of having that person that is dedicated to pushing it forward. You can't have somebody that is doing a separate job, because really it is a full-time job, and there has to be some passion with it as well. Probably if Lindsay hadn't had the passion she had, we probably wouldn't have gotten it finished. So you've got to have but you don't want to have too passionate. They got to work, but it is their life, and it's a task that they have to push forward. And so having that person that is going to be that person do all of this, it takes a lot of work. And so so don't underestimate putting somebody that is their job is implement this, but there are people out there that you can hire to help, and that's where I think Lindsay comes in, that she can do a lot more of that. If you don't have that person to be it, they can step in and run with that. We just didn't have that option. We had someone on staff that could. So so your staffing may not be where you can take that person and put it there, but I believe that there are tools out there in companies like Lindsay's out there that can do a lot of that stuff for you, and sometimes that can be daunting there. So so your staff may not be set up the exact same way. We're just very fortunate the way that we were set up that we could do it. But I think we're ready for questions now, I believe. So
Yeah. And I bottled
so
that passion, just so you know, we've bottled that passion, and we have a team of people at Bantam with that passion. It's not passion that I had, Scott. It's passion I still have.
Okay. Never went away. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. We do have a lot of questions, so let's get started. The first one is it possible to get CMAQ funding, congestion mitigation and air quality funding, for projects like this?
Yeah.
That is correct, yeah. So if you're in a maintenance or non-attainment area, yes, and CMAQ is what we use. So yes, if you are in that, you can spend it toward that. Just work with your local federal highway rep just to make sure that the request and everything is the way that they like it and stuff. So, but yes, CMAQ is allowed.
There's also TAP funding, Transportation Alternative Programs. That's what we've used in other communities as well. And FTA funding to a degree as well. So several pots that could be accessed.
Yeah. But just know with TAP, though, the state determines what the rules are, so you'll have to check with your DOT to find that out. So because they can put requirements or limitations on what those funds can be used for.
Okay, how about Tiger grants?
Yeah, BikeShare can be built into a Tiger grant, but I believe there needs to be a much bigger project associated with it, and Tiger grants are hard to access. Scott, you can run with that. I'm sorry, I really shouldn't answer these questions.
Oh, no, that's true. Yeah, with Tiger you can, but it will probably have to be a part of something bigger. So 400 bikes, 400 stations was what, 2.8 million? Linda, if I remember correctly. So yeah. I would say that that's probably smaller than what a Tiger, but if you can integrate that into a transit or something, it would probably be very successful there.
Yeah, it was 2 million.
Okay.
I think it ended up being maybe 2.2 million at the end of the day.
That's right. It was 2.2 or 2.3.
Yeah, we went with the electric pedal assist, so I think that's why it was a little higher. But I've seen the gamut of pricing, so just depends on your system size. But I think 400 bikes, 2 million is fair for right now what we're seeing in the market, just if somebody wants a ballpark.
Great. Next question. What recommendations do you have regarding a bike share program in an auto-oriented suburban community?
Well, I would say that we actually are seeing this in the small to medium-sized cities. I have several cities that I'm working with in Alabama still that are auto-oriented, and I would say Birmingham is an auto-oriented community as well as Baton Rouge. But there are pockets, particularly focusing on your downtown area and looking at the core, wherever that core exists. If there's a main street or there's a trail system or something like that that you can grab a hold of and implement bike share, that's kind of one of the best practices or places that I would look first. And looking at those side roads and connectivity as a whole, and is this safe, right? Is this a safe option to put out, or do we have these wide lanes, high traffic, rapid speeds, and I would not recommend putting a bike share system right there. So I would say if you have any kind of core areas that are smaller hubs that have that downtown Main Street feel, to really grab some of that and grow out from there, and or trail systems or traces. I know I'm working in a community right now that has a trail system that runs through 6 communities, and I will not say all of them are bike friendly or, you know, they're car oriented communities, but they do have this amazing 30-mile trail system. And for the communities where it makes sense, we're branching off the trail system and going into their smaller towns. But for those that don't, we're connecting through the trail and kind of staying there. And or looking at sports complexes where it's kind of contained. There's usually a bike path or trail that exists within a complex. So we're looking at kind of smaller systems and where is there contained activity that promotes, you know, health and activity, outdoor activity. So just some early.
Yeah, I would add that the bike share system doesn't have to be a certain size. That's a great thing about bike share. It doesn't have to be 400, 500. It can be 10. What is your phased approach? So that's a great thing about bike shares. You can make it fit to whatever your environment is. But there are some, like Lindsay said, best tools, best ideas, things you want to make sure you set up for success. But the great thing about bike share, it's not just for the big city. It's not just for the, you know, you have to have 1 million people. It really can fit to what your community wants. And so I would stress that to everybody.
I just responded to an RFP with 50 bikes, if that helps anyone kind of know. We're kind of 50 bikes and above. But yes, it can be smaller too for, you know, more contained areas. Well, I'll say one of my communities actually is doing 30 bikes. Now they have a city next to them doing 100, but one of my communities is doing 30 bikes. So.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Are there specific geographic considerations that you need to take into account for implementation? For example, will a bike share really work in a particularly hilly city?
I think this goes back to the comment about the electric pedal assist bike. Looking at the topography, Birmingham is a hilly city. We have a flat downtown, but we do have these viaduct bridges that separate our north and our south. That on a bike is not super enjoyable to ride over. And then going into the residential communities, we go up a hill. Birmingham is in a valley, and we go up a hill. So Birmingham is a hilly city. It's not a Tacoma, Washington, or Seattle, but I would say that electric pedal assist is what you want to look at that point. And that's why it's good that there are multiple vendors coming out that are offering this option to you, because it's more price and cost competitive. So I would say yes, it can, but I would from the beginning push electric pedal assist bike share at that point. I would personally not launch a bike share system in a very, very hilly city without having some electric pedal assist component connected. So that's when you want to look at the grid, tying your system into the grid, and electric pedal assist.
Okay, let's stay on this electric assist for a moment. So do you have any comments about their safety? We're getting a lot of questions about that in terms of liability and safety and how fast they can actually go. Yeah. Could you kind of pull that apart?
Absolutely. So for us, we do have a state law where the bikes can't go over 20 miles per hour because they are considered a motorcycle at that point. So we set the bikes to only go 16 miles per hour, and it's pedal powered. So it's electric pedal assist. It is not a throttle. You do not control it with your hand. You control it with your feet. So the faster you pedal, the faster the bike goes. When it hits that 16 miles per hour, then it dials back and you can no longer feel the pedal assist. You're almost kind of like a noodle leg at that point, to be not technical with that. But so we set the controls, and a local operator can do that, and the maintenance team can maintain those. And so, so that's controllable as far as how fast they go and what your laws are and what you're comfortable with. Again, our law was 20 miles per hour, but we said, you know what, let's do 16 miles per hour. When you're riding the electric pedal assist bike in Birmingham, you're always in control. You stop pedaling, the pedal assist cuts off. You hit the brakes, the pedal assist cuts off. So then it rides like a normal bike. So that's from a safety perspective. It's just kind of it became a non-factor for us. And the insurance and liability is the same. The waiver is signed. The insurance company is aware of the pedal assist, and again, it's pedal powered. And so we did not have any challenges to really work through. You may have some state laws that you might want to clarify. That may be a little, the bike then becomes possibly a little gray area. We were lucky in Alabama, but for it not to be considered a motorcycle because of the pedal power. It is controlled by the pedal and you pedaling. So that really is what removed some of the safety concerns. And then people rode them, whether it's our elected officials or citizens, because we had a demo bike prior to launch, and they loved them, and they realized that it didn't feel unsafe, and it wasn't throttle, and it just was a different experience. And the concern really became moot.
Okay, great, thank you.
Actually, the community is now begging for more in Birmingham, and funding has been secured to retrofit more bikes in the pedal assist. So if that tells you anything.
Great. Are there any three-wheel bike shares out there? The person asking the question is thinking of the elderly or others uncomfortable with two-wheel bikes.
Yes, almost all bike share vendors can offer you different bikes for different types of scenarios. I know that Zagster has a trike that they put out. Again, I would just look at quality of what I'm telling you. I know that B-Cycle has looked at the trike before, and so there are options. I believe Detroit, Michigan is really focusing on some bike variations that would make it more accessible for a larger set of their population. So Detroit, if I am remembering correctly, that might be a good place to look for that. But I will say once people look into it, they typically end up not just going with the standard bike unless, again, there's a station that specifically serves a facility or a rehab center or something along those lines where there's a large set of population that might benefit from the trike or a handheld cycle or something along those lines. But most don't, because you can't guarantee that those couple of bikes are going to be in the exact spot that that person needs them at the exact time they need it. So then is it really beneficial? It just becomes a question of what your community decides and what the vendor is able to provide for you to really meet your needs. So I would say, yes, there are options, but that's probably why you don't see them actually implemented a ton.
Okay, thanks. Are there any bike share systems out there using peak period or off-peak pricing? Kind of like with Uber, if there's a surge, prices go up. Is there a thing out there like this?
Yeah, I know Social Bike can do this, but I think they tend to do it more in incentive-based instead of pricing, which I think they can do that, but it's more of incentives for people to rebalance the system. So if there's a large event, like for example in Baton Rouge, we have LSU, 100,000 people going to the LSU campus on a Saturday. So we would implement, or in New Orleans, the New Orleans market, Bourbon Street, or during Mardi Gras, obviously, a large amount of bikes go into certain places. So it could be implemented where you're incentivizing people to actually take the bikes back out of those heavy traffic areas, ride them back out, or the next day when it slows down. We're actually giving credits to people, so if they get any overtime charges and or they can keep the bike a little bit longer at some point. So you're incentivizing them to help you rebalance the system. And I love that about the smart bike. I believe that's something that the B-Cycle Dash is looking at or it can implement as well. But I like incentivized based credits to the system because it just helps you with rebalancing and reduces some of your operational strains. So that absolutely has been implemented.
Okay. We're getting several questions about the dockless bikes. People are a little bit confused. Can you go over that again?
Yeah. So there are companies coming into the U.S. from China right now, as well as a U.S.-based company called Spin, that are launching or bringing bikes in to communities and saying, hey, you don't need docking stations for these bikes. The back wheel locks and somebody can just leave it right here on the sidewalk and go into their meeting. And when they come back out, the bike may or may not be there, but the bike can just be locked to itself for safety or for security. And they can go on their way. So they're saying it adds convenience, and these bikes can go where people really want them to go, whereas the docks are, you need to ride to the dock the bike, and then maybe walk a block to your meeting. But when you come back out, to go back to that station, and there are a set of bicycles there, right? So there's pros and cons to it. But the dockless bike is basically a smart bike, which is the B-Cycle bike, B-Cycle Dash, or the social bike that I showed you. It's basically that technology, but it's saying, hey, you don't need docks. And the smart bikes that exist that you may have seen in other communities like social bikes or soon to be B-Cycle Dash, those too are dockless bikes. You can do a roam-free system with those that exist, but it's just cities want to do that roam-free. Or have these drop stations where there's still no docks, and are you comfortable with that, or are you not? And adding some regulation in to either allow for it or not allow for it. But you're having these dockless bike systems come in and say, we'll give you bike share for free. These bikes don't really need to be maintained. They're just going to be available, and I'm concerned about that model. And I think there's a lot to be considered, positive and negative. So that's what a dockless bike is. It's basically a smart bike, which you've probably seen in some communities, but it's encouraging that there's no dock at all.
Which can be a challenge, because if you have a dock station that's a block from your office, so if you walk out and there's bikes there, that you can just go from there, where if you have them just parked everywhere, you may have to walk 2 to 3 or 4 blocks just to get a bike. And so that's a challenge as well. So it's a logistical challenge, and people can't count on or know where the bikes are. So good and bad, it's just kind of, there's not consistency in where bikes are offered.
You would look at an app just like you do with the docks. You can look at the app while you're sitting at your desk, and you can see how many bikes are at the dock. But you would be looking at an app to see where there is a bike in the community, right? So it may not be within a block of where you are. But then again, you can park when you go to your meeting, you park at the front door. But what this would do is the dockless system would require you to have a much more amount of bikes. So no, you don't have to purchase the docks, but you need to then purchase a larger bike fleet than you think that you need. Because at that point, convenience and accessibility becomes extremely, extremely important, since you've now reduced the reliability and the reliability piece of the dock. You need to have a bigger fleet of bikes to then accommodate that scenario that Scott just named. Or else you will have bikes and people won't use them because they're too spread out, or the system's too small, and the bike is never where they need it to be. And or you walk out of a meeting and you're bikeless and you're frustrated at that point. So having more bikes, bigger fleet would probably need to be a factor. Does that all make sense as far as the dockless bike goes?
Yeah, if we have any other questions, I'll interject. I think that's good. Let's switch and talk about inclusivity for a moment. What do we do about folks who either don't have internet access, smartphones, or credit cards? How are they able to participate?
Yeah, I can talk about this as an operator. We implement this in every city that I go to. We accept cash payment at our office, or they can come in if they don't have access to the internet, which obviously we encourage that there is internet use at the library if the cash option is not a barrier for them, and they do have a credit card, and they still can qualify for subsidized membership, and we can kind of do those checks over the phone with them and get them on their way without them necessarily coming into the office. So we try to make it as easy as possible for low-income individuals to access the system, but we offer a cash payment and a subsidized membership. It's called Access for All in Birmingham. We also are introducing the Pay Near Me feature with vendors that it's compatible with. So you can go into a local Circle K or whatever and access and load money on your card that way. I know Philadelphia, shout out to Indigo, and that operator, they do a wonderful job with equity. So Philadelphia would be a great community to look at for their equity best practices. We're all of us are watching Philly and replicating and duplicating what they're doing. But the cash payment option is typically not a barrier, and it should be something that I think is built in, the subsidized memberships as well. And you will see some kiosks coming out where potentially where cash is accepted at the kiosk. So at a payment kiosk. Whereas I will say two things though. I think that the kiosk is not necessary in all places. I think high tourist areas are where kiosks are necessary. So don't add that expense to your capital budget if you don't have to. And two, you then do have sitting ATMs around your community. And I would be concerned as an operator for the staff that has to get the funds out of that ATM that is not secure, necessarily, monitored with security, and with users that are walking up with cash. So I won't tell a community not to do it if they feel like that's the best fit for them, but I will just, again, always show the other side of the coin of what that could mean. So there are a lot of opportunities to also integrating transit passes. That's also an option. So then that helps kind of streamline where they can put some money on their transit card for bus and for bike share. So lots of best practices coming out. But the equity piece is a really, really grassroots driven, typically high touch program. We got to get the word out, on the community level. And so we do a lot of that, a lot of public speaking, neighborhoods, having community events, bike safety in classes are in conjunction with that a lot of times. But I think subsidized memberships and accepting cash payment are imperative things that every operator should build into the budget and the pro forma for a community. And the community should want to implement.
Okay, thanks. So what happens if someone steals a bike, doesn't return it?
So there's live GPS on every bike, as I mentioned earlier. So you can see where the bikes are at all times. And so that really becomes a non-factor. It's also connected to a membership card. So it's connected to someone's credit card. So we know who that member is. I will say on the social bike and on the B-Cycle Smart Bike, one of the reasons I like this is because you touch your membership card and then you put in a 4-digit unique code. So even if somebody stole your membership card, unless they have that 4-digit code, they can't access the bike. So there's an added level of security in there. I will say this as well. I put a smart bike in my car and driven to another community to show them the demo bike that I had, and I forgot to mark the bike as being in my possession and that it was fine. And that bike started alarming. An alarm went off, it locked down, and I had to go in the back office to unlock it. And tell the system it was not stolen. And so the bike has built-in security systems on it, and the back wheel locks down. The back wheel will not move at that point. And so it has built-in security systems on it. I thought there was an ambulance coming behind my car at the time. And so it becomes really less of a factor. We've had a couple in Birmingham, what we call learning opportunities, where we saw the bike was not being returned to the system in a proper amount of time. We could see where the bike was, the GPS system. We worked with our local authorities if that was required after we tried to reach out to the user. Most of the time, the user just didn't understand how to use the system, and it wasn't a case of it being stolen. But I think there was one incident where somebody had gotten a bike from a user that had walked away from the bike for a moment, I don't know, taking a picture or distracted, and we knew where the bike was. We were able to get it back really easily. And worked with our local police to get it back. So it's just because it also is a really community-driven program. And when people start seeing people misusing the program or what they think might be a theft situation, I mean, they'll call you. So it kind of just takes this life of its own as well, where the community really gets behind this and doesn't want to see it vandalized or, bike missing or anything like that. So live GPS, the additional security features on the bike. Also, the bikes are patented parts. All the vendors have patented parts. So even if you got it, be extremely hard to take it apart. There's specialized size tools and parts on a lot on the bike. Not all parts, but a lot of them.
Okay. The Portland Biketown bikes were vandalized immediately after launching last summer. This included cutting of spokes and slashing tires. Any advice on how to prevent this sort of vandalism? Cameras, monitoring?
The vandalism actually just happened this week, I believe. And so I'll tell you real quick, though. The bikes in Portland were vandalized, but I don't know if y'all saw the follow-up news from Portland and from their operator, Motivate, but the city, the community really came out in outrage of this. They were angry. And several bike shop owners allowed their staff to go help the operator fix the bikes, and several other local businesses stepped up with their employees to help fix the bikes and to do it very quickly to relieve the issue, because I think there were 200 bikes that were vandalized. And it was really a silly motive. They were trying to, they didn't want corporations to come in. And there's also been a lot of citizens that have stepped up and said, that was my way to work, to my local job. And now, so if you're trying to, if your statement is against corporate government, you have just hurt me as a local business owner and or my commute and my way to work. So it's really kind of backfiring, sticking it to the man type thing, because again, these are really community-driven programs. So, so you'll see the community step up, you'll see your operator step up and immediately resolve those issues. Usually the operator, and you should build this into your contract, takes responsibility, has parts on hand, and or your bike vendor would, I'm sure, react as well very quickly to get parts to you to replace those and get those bikes back in order. And it's interesting the outrage that came from Portlandiers, I think that's what they're called, that because they're so behind BikeShare and they were really mad about this happening. So security cameras, sure, if you can, if you want to. I would say vandalism and theft in BikeShare are extremely low across the country. Not that it doesn't happen at all, but that it's very, very, very low. And so I'm not sure if it's necessary as much as it is, making it community driven, making it that grassroots level, having those operators that know that live and work, they work there, they live there, they're from there. So when I go in and I operate a city, I hire local and I train them. And I want that to be your rebalancer and your customer service and your sales and marketing. It's people that know and love your community. So that's what helps with the community-driven piece. So I don't know if there's other strategies that I think that are cheaper that you can use that are not requiring you to purchase security cameras. And it's just so low. There are thousands of bikes across the country, over 105 systems. So, and you don't read those stories every day. So I would say theft and vandalism should not be your top concern.
Okay. So how do you measure the performance of individual BikeShare stations? So for example, if nobody's using a station or rarely using a station, do you retain it anyway just for the coverage?
It just depends. Is it high? One, we look at it as a high density area and it's still not being used. So maybe it's hidden, maybe it's not placed in the right position. Maybe there's a local employer or a large employer right across that has not been engaged from a corporate membership standpoint or something. So, we might pull out some other strategies before we just up and move the bike system, that dock. But certainly they're mobile, so they can. There are, usually with all the bike systems, they do bolts into the ground. But those bolts are so minimal and small that you can easily fill that hole. We move it and we go. So there's really no noticeable, just like as if you were to put a sign in the ground, a street sign. So, so we can move these stations at any time. I would encourage a city to look at, well, is this one of our stations that are serving low-income areas, and the usage is not there because of other barriers. So even as an operator, which I love revenue-generating stations, that's what keeps our non-revenue generating stations keep sustainable. But so I would look at a lot of factors before I just up and moved a station. if it was to serve a low-income neighborhood and there were some other outreach efforts we could do to educate those that live in that community, and maybe it's a reading barrier, maybe it's a, I don't know how the system works, it's intimidating, it just doesn't seem like it's for me, and then there might be some other outreach or marketing things we could do before we just up and move that station. And so I would look at various things before I moved a non-revenue generating station. I think there's a lot more factors that go into it than just the performance. Yet we want high-performing stations, and you do have to have more high-performing stations than you do low-performing stations, or your system will be out of whack. So being very strategic with your site planning, and that's where a feasibility study does come in hand, and kind of being very sensitive to the equity piece of BikeShare, and factoring all that in. Do you have anything, Scott, for that?
No, you had it all, so it's good.
Okay. What's the lifespan of a bicycle?
Typically, the warranties are 3 to 5 years. The bikes, obviously, the parts are changed all the time with the maintenance, the fleet maintenance. There's routine maintenance schedules that we adhere to for insurance purposes and for quality guarantees that we've made to the city or to our stakeholders, whoever we're working with. And so we follow a maintenance schedule. So the parts, the individual parts of the bike are changed pretty regularly, depending on what part it is, etc. But the lifespan of the bike, the frame, I've seen 3 and I've seen 5 years. I prefer to see a 5-year because you're looking at, I mean, you see people riding their regular bikes that are old and being refurbished, right? So I just don't think that the warranty, I think a 5-year warranty is good. That's what I like to see. And those bikes can go beyond the warranty as long as they're maintained properly over the years and they're looked after. Then I believe those bikes could go out over 5 years. I think that DC is kind of showing that right now, that some of their bikes are outside the warranty because they were the first BikeShare system that opened in the U.S. in 2011, and we're in 2017. So so the bikes can go beyond the warranty for sure, the frame. It's just, are they maintained properly along the way, just like your car.
Okay.
The stations, the docks and the stations, warranty is usually 5 years on those, but again, those can go much longer as well. I mean,
Okay. We're going to talk about money for the last few minutes that we have. There are several questions about sponsorships that cover, operating and maintenance. Could you go into a little bit more detail about the types of sponsorships that you see?
Yeah, I've secured close to $10 million in sponsorships for BikeShare. So it's one of the things that I do under Bantam and what I help communities do. We have those templates in place depending on we can scale them depending on the size of the city and what's available there. I always like to look at our local sponsors first, or regional sponsors. Usually it's healthcare providers. You see Blue Cross Blue Shield has really stepped up across the country as a great corporate sponsor. I do 5 years corporate sponsorships, obviously, and they pay me per year. I don't get all the money up front, and they are wonderful partners. We actually keep them at the table. We keep them informed. We show them their return on their investment. You also could looking at product-based services or product-based, consumer-based products like soft drinks and any other product that you might see in on a store shelf that someone would use. Those are good partnerships. Nike is a great one, Portland Nike shoes. So consumer-based products are another good one. Banks, financial institutions, you've seen City Bike, Regions in Birmingham, because they're headquartered there, stepped up for that one. And so you are seeing some financial institutions that will step up. A lot of time, again, other healthcare entities. We have a health district here in Baton Rouge, so all the hospitals are coming together to kind of throw in their piece of the pie because they love it and want people active and healthy and riding. And so those are the types of companies. Also wireless, sometimes wireless, I mean, you might have existing partnerships with wireless providers for the bikes, for the live GPS. So you do want to kind of be aware of those existing partnerships. But if there's just a dominant party in a community, I always look at those first. And I like to look for companies that have active living or active lifestyle or health as one of their key initiatives. They always seem to be really good partners. For example, Raising Cane's here in Baton Rouge. That's definitely a regional fast food chain that serves chicken. But they are, people like that, where they have an active living kind of community goal because they serve fried chicken and sweet tea.
I would say two other things. Most of the big companies have foundations as well, so those foundations do this kind of stuff. And also, many of the companies that are bigger provide their own healthcare. They're self-insured, so they have kind of a health aspect. So we were surprised at how many companies were self-insured. So that was another incentive that they give to their employees.
Yeah.
So
power
many
companies
different ways, ways to do it. So
yeah, power companies are another good one to talk with. They tend to like BikeShare and the technology piece that goes behind it. Surprising, in Baton Rouge, there are petroleum and oil companies here. They're very interested, one from the environmental standpoint, but also a lot of the components on the bike, like the tires, use their products. So there's kind of twofold. So just kind of piecing it together. I always look, again, locally or regionally first. But it's, a lot of people can get behind BikeShare, but it's going in with the right pitch, targeting the right people. And Scott made a great point with its foundation money. Sometimes it's advertising branding money. Sometimes it's foundation money. If it's advertising money, I like to target their billboard line item budget, because these are rolling billboards, but with a community goodwill behind it, and not just billboard on the side of the interstate. So there's a lot more impact that can go along with being a rolling billboard instead for a good community program. So foundations and advertising marketing dollars are definitely funds we go for with the operations. But I would say honestly, the city should not be responsible for raising the operations dollars. I mean, they're certainly a partner in it, but work with your BikeShare operator. That should be their role to build that in for you. Build that in as a thing that they could do for you.
Okay, last question, and this kind of goes back to the beginning when we're talking about budgets. There have been several questions about the revenue. Does the revenue just from riders and from sponsors, does it generally just cover operations and maintenance, or can you actually end up recouping some of your capital investment?
Correct. It just typically goes for maintenance and operations. There's usually not enough for you to recoup your capital investment. I won't say that that's impossible, but if you're using federal dollars for it, it kind of gets a little tricky. I won't say it's impossible in some markets, particularly tourist markets. We have seen that where it's more of a privatized type system, and or the revenues are generating from the sponsors and from the users is higher. But I would say that is not a recommended model in most communities, and probably will set you up for failure or put unnecessary restrictions on your operator who would probably not be interested in that model. But I will say that one of the reasons that I set up the 501c3 when necessary for a community is that it does provide that transparency and accountability. And I give you an annual budget, operations and maintenance budget, and we meet regularly, so you see that we're on track for that. And as long as we didn't hit any, unforeseen hardships, that if there's any additional money left over from that, I either encourage that it go into a rainy day fund for BikeShare operations in future years, or for upgrading or expanding equipment in future years. That is where I first recommend that funding go. Or stay with the BikeShare system, because it was generated by the BikeShare system and or your operator. But that's under this 501c3 model. Or two, it goes towards bike infrastructure, advancing bike infrastructure. I will say we haven't not seen that unfold in a lot of communities where there's just enough revenues going along that they have this money to go towards bike infrastructure. But I think what I mentioned earlier, where you're going to see less government funding coming for bike share, and there's this new model kind of coming down the pipeline, that's where you might see that kind of model prevail. So stay tuned on that. This is very, very early hitting the U.S. This notion of less government money for bike share, and but it's not impossible. So we're very early stages, initial stages of talking about this from a strategic business standpoint of the industry. When I say we, the industry is talking about this, the bike share industry. So stay tuned on that piece. But right now, the typical model is government equipment, government-funded equipment and installation, private sector sponsorships, ad panels, user revenues, with any profit staying with the system and or the operator, but I like it to stay with the system for future expansion or upgrades or any unforeseen issues.
Okay, we have run out of time. So Lindsay West of Bantam Strategy Group and Scott Tillman from the Birmingham RPC, thanks for joining us today and giving us the lowdown on BikeShare. And thanks everyone for joining us, and to the Transportation Planning Division for sponsoring today's webcast. And we will talk to everyone next time. Have a great weekend.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.